Continuing our reading in Abraham Hannibal and the Raiders of the Sands by Francis Summers Cox, Chapter 13, The Emperor's Palace, January to February in the year 1703. The sun was at its highest, and he had to squeeze up his eyes against the fierce glare when he first saw Gondar. The steep path was leveling out, and the caravan was beginning to spread over the hillside, when there, up above him, was the city, a great mass of straw-thatched huts, with green trees in between, and above them, like the pictures of Jerusalem in the story of the kings, the high stone walls of the palace compound, and behind the walls, the towers and battlements of the royal castle, Gondar. "Abraham!" called Phares, the Lord of the Sea. "Yes, father?" "You will ride with me through the city. Mount your mule." They had found a replacement mule for Abraham, a steady brown mare called Trusty, but he normally only rode her when he was desperately tired. He and his father and some dozen of his father's warriors left the caravan on the outskirts of the city and rode through the dusty alleyways until they came to the high, brown battlemented walls, and their herald blew his horn in front of a huge gate. They were led through a great courtyard full of stone buildings, not just two-storied like his father's palace, but looming 3 and 4 stories high, with towers higher still, and with more windows and bigger ones than he had ever seen in his life, past a big square fish pond, and through the great doors of one of the palaces, then through room after room, their walls and ceilings glowing with paintings and gold, until at last they were led into a hall, where at the far end sat cross-legged on his throne the King of Kings, the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah, the Emperor Jesus the Great, surrounded by rows of his great lords, all standing in absolute silence. Abraham watched to see what his father was going to do. Phares, the Lord of the Sea, strode forward to the throne and lay down flat on the floor, then knelt and kissed the emperor's foot 3 times in all. "Lord of the Sea has brought the King of Kings the tribute that is his due," rang out his father's voice. The emperor nodded. "The King of Kings thanks the Lord of the Sea for his gifts. His followers may approach." One by one, Abraham and then the chiefs did as his father had done. Then there were endless grand speeches on both sides. But Abraham wasn't listening, he was looking. It was wonderful, like standing in the middle of a picture in Stories of the Kings. The whole room, even the ceiling, was painted with palm trees, except where it had huge mirrors set into the walls in ivory frames. To think of that, every one of those mirrors had to cross the terrible river. The throne was of gold with red and gold cushions, and Jesus the Great himself was a blaze of color and gold in a long robe of blue velvet with huge dangling sleeves and little gold flowers all over it. He had a gold-striped veil round his head and pulled across his mouth, and curly-toed slippers with pearls all over them. Abraham stared and stared at him. "I wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of him. He does have sensible eyes, but they've got a strict sort of look about them, like father on one of his angry days." The lords were all wearing the most amazingly bright robes. He didn't even know the names of the colors, with gold bracelets and brooches galore. And then suddenly Abraham jumped. At the end of the front row stood a white man, but not like Yanni at all. He was much paler for a start, with curiously light eyes, a sort of sky blue, and he didn't have a beard. And although he didn't seem very old, his hair was like a huge white sheep's fleece, or maybe a thorn tree in bloom, or he wore strange tight leg coverings right down to his big shiny shoes with heavy high heels, and a funny wide-skirted coat decorated with silver. He caught Abraham's staring eyes and very slowly winked one of his sky blue eyes. Abraham, embarrassed, looked down at his feet. Suddenly, as Abraham was in a daydream about Nimrod and where the emperor kept his lions, he heard his name. "He is a young boy to make such a long journey, my lord, but to be kind is a kind of reward. Grandmothers by the fireside are already telling stories about his deeds." "Is that so, Fares? Tell us all, if you and he are not too tired." And the Lord of the Sea told the story of the elephants, with Abraham's narrow escape in the terrible river, and on the mountainside thrown in for good measure. Everyone clapped politely at the end, and Abraham could see the white man staring at him, while someone whispered busily into his ear, translating, he supposed, into the white man's language. "So, Abraham," said the emperor, "it seems as if you have great things ahead of you. If you have started so young, come here." Abraham stepped right up to the base of the throne, and the King of Kings put his hands on his shoulders and looked at him. "You will make a good friend for my son, Alem. You and he are of an age." And that is the end of the chapter.